They thought humiliating me in front of everyone would end my career. But the moment he read my own forged review out loud, he didn't realize every lie he spoke carried my proof inside it. What happened next? It didn't just end his job, it ended his power. My name is Dana. I'm 34 years old. The boardroom smelled like burnt coffee and cheap ambition. That smell always lingered in the mornings after a long week. Coffee grounds left too long in the machine, stress hanging in the air thicker than steam. The lights above hummed with that sterile, office-white glare that made everything look a little washed out, like the life had been ironed out of the people who worked here. The chairs were those rigid, gray ones that creaked when you shifted. A constant reminder that comfort wasn't part of the deal. The long table gleamed beneath the projector light, reflecting slices of blue and white across the glossy surface, and the faint scent of floor polish mixed with anxiety. I sat 2 seats from the end, pen poised above my notepad though I wasn't writing. My fingertips pressed into the metal spiral until they left marks. The projector flickered, once, twice, before stabilizing on the company logo. Eric sat at the head of the table, leaning back like he owned the place. He didn't, but that never stopped him from acting like he did. The manila folder in front of him was unassuming, almost harmless, but I knew what was inside it. My name was printed on the tab in his neat handwriting. Too neat, too deliberate. I'd seen that same handwriting on dozens of meeting notes, memos, post-its he left on my desk. Quick update. See me. Run this by me first. It always sounded like collaboration, but it was control. He cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the quiet like a gavel. Then he tapped the folder twice, savoring the silence he'd created. Around us, the team of 12 shifted in their chairs. Some leaned forward with interest. Others pretended to check their phones, pretending not to care but dying to watch. The air changed when Eric smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind that said, "I've already won. Let's just get this out of the way, shall we?" His voice carried that practiced confidence, half teacher, half executioner. The first sentence wasn't true. I knew it before the words finished leaving his mouth. Dana has shown a consistent lack of initiative. The phrase landed like a slap. I could feel the shift in the room, the way shoulders leaned, the way glances met, the faint sound of someone stifling a laugh near the window. He kept going, voice steady, rhythm rehearsed. She's repeatedly failed to demonstrate leadership in high-pressure situations. The words rolled off his tongue like he'd written them himself, which, of course, he had. I sat still. My pen didn't move. My jaw stayed relaxed. Only my pulse betrayed me, thrumming in. My neck with every fabricated sentence. He turned a page. Paper rasped against paper. Her inability to meet deadlines and deliver consistent performance has been noted by multiple team members. The words hung in the air for a beat too long, just enough for the subtext to sink in. She's unreliable. One of the analysts smirked. Another whispered something I couldn't hear. I didn't need to. The humiliation was supposed to sting. It was supposed to corner me, shrink me, silence me. But humiliation, when it reaches a certain temperature, hardens instead of burns. I watched his reflection in the glass wall behind him. He was enjoying this. The cadence of his voice had that faint upward lilt that people get when they're pleased with themselves. He believed every fabricated line he'd built. Maybe he even convinced himself it was true. That's how liars survive. They rehearse until the lie feels comfortable in their mouth. I didn't interrupt. I didn't flinch. I sat through every second of his performance like a patient audience, because I knew something he didn't. I wasn't the one on stage. He was. In my lap, beneath the table, my fingers rested on a blue folder. It was heavier, thicker than the one he held. The paper inside was warm from my palms, stamped, signed, and sealed by HR. It was the truth, and I was waiting for the right moment to let it breathe. He turned another page. Dana's lack of team cohesion has created unnecessary tension within the department. The words were meant to draw blood. Instead, they reminded me of late nights last quarter, when I'd stayed after hours fixing his numbers, of the presentation I built while he went golfing with the VP, of the time he'd said, "You're good with formatting, right? I'll handle the talking points." He never did. I had. Every time. I drew in a slow breath. The air tasted faintly metallic from the vent above, recycled and dry. I focused on the edge of my folder, the way the cardboard dug into my skin. It kept me anchored, grounded, silent. He spoke like a man holding power, but real power doesn't need a microphone. It waits. When he finally reached the end, he paused for effect, closed the folder with a crisp sound, the kind of sound that punctuates a conclusion. Then he smiled again, too wide, too satisfied. "Any thoughts?" he asked. The room tilted, almost imperceptibly. Everyone looked at me. I could feel the collective curiosity pulsing through the air, like static before a storm. I tilted my head slightly. My voice came out smooth, calm, almost amused. "Thanks for the performance overview, Eric. I actually have something to add." That was the moment the energy shifted, subtle but definite. My chair scraped softly against the floor as I stood. My heels clicked with a rhythm that felt deliberate. 22 eyes followed me as I walked toward him. Eric's smirk faltered by a fraction. I stopped at the head of the table, close enough to see the pulse flutter at his temple. Then, without hurry, I placed my blue folder beside his manila one. The contrast was almost poetic, truth and fiction side by side. I opened it. The pages inside were immaculate, crisp white, company letterhead shining faintly in the projector light. I slid out several copies and began passing them around the table, one to the regional director, one to HR, one to the VP of operations. I moved without speaking, the sound of paper sliding against paper filling the silence. When I reached Eric, I laid the final copy in front of him. "This," I said quietly, "is my actual performance review. Signed and time-stamped by HR 2 weeks ago. Page 4 is especially interesting, the part where I was recommended for team lead." Silence fell so thick it almost had weight. The faint hum of the projector dimmed into nothing. Someone exhaled too loudly near the back. The HR representative was the first to react. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning line after line. The rustle of paper echoed like thunder in the hush. When she looked up, her voice was steady but sharp. "This isn't the review I gave you." Eric's lips parted, forming the beginnings of a protest. What came out was not a defense, but a stammer. Then a laugh, too high, too quick. "There must have been some kind of mix-up." "There wasn't." My voice cut through his sentence like glass through cloth. I turned to the VP next, meeting his eyes directly. "Check the metadata on the document he just read. There's no HR signature, no timestamp. And the formatting? It's wrong. He changed it." The VP's brow furrowed. HR leaned forward, pulling her laptop from her bag. The keyboard clicked rapidly as she typed, the sound bouncing off the walls. She connected to the internal server, eyes flicking between the printed copies and the screen's glow reflecting in her glasses. No one moved. Even Eric's breathing sounded loud now, uneven, shallow. His hand hovered above the fake folder like it could shield him. HR scrolled, paused, scrolled again. Then she stopped. The cursor blinked on her screen as she opened the PDF file from HR's database, the original document. She compared it to the paper in front of her. I could see the change wash over her face, from confusion to realization to something close to anger. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she looked up, voice flat and final. "His copy's been edited, no doubt about it." A murmur rippled through the room. The VP's chair creaked as he leaned forward, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Eric," he said, low and deliberate. "Is this true?" Eric's mouth opened, but no sound came. Only the sound of paper rustling as he tried to gather his folder, hands trembling. The edges bent beneath his grip. His face, usually flushed with smug color, was pale now, drained, exposed. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." The tension swelled until it felt like the room itself was holding its breath, and I stood there, watching him unravel piece by piece. Too late. The damage had already been done. The silence that followed could have cracked glass. It was the kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it presses against your skin, crawls into your lungs, makes the air feel heavy and wrong. You could feel it, the weight of every withheld breath, the disbelief thick as smoke. No one wanted to move first. No one wanted to break the spell. Eric's hand hovered mid-air above the stack of papers, his fingers twitching as if he could somehow rebuild the lie by arranging the pages into order. The motion was small, almost pitiful. His knuckles were white, gripping the edge of the folder that moments ago had been his weapon. Now it looked like evidence. I didn't sit down right away. I stayed standing at the head of the table, letting that long, aching, quiet stretch until it became unbearable. Every second was a reminder that this wasn't his room anymore. The spotlight that used to belong to him had shifted, and he could feel it burning through his composure. The HR representative finally spoke. Her voice sliced through the silence like a paper cut. "Eric, I need you to explain how you got that version." Her tone wasn't just professional, it was sharp, clipped. The sound of someone who realizes too late that their name could have been attached to something much worse. I could almost see the calculation behind her eyes. She was already writing her report in her head. Eric laughed, a brittle, hollow sound that cracked at the edges. It wasn't confidence. It was desperation wearing its best suit. "Come on," he said, forcing a smile. "It's a misunderstanding. The files must have crossed during revisions." "Revisions?" I interrupted, my voice steady but colder than I meant it to be. "Of a performance review?" The words echoed against the glass walls, bounced back sharper than they left my mouth. I hadn't raised my tone. I didn't need to. The stillness around us amplified every syllable. Outside, I could see interns walking by, coffee cups in hand, laughing about something trivial. Their reflections blurred across the glass, tiny fragments of normal life continuing while mine pivoted on this exact moment. They had no idea a career was unraveling just feet away. Inside, everything was still. The hierarchy that had towered above me for months was beginning to tilt. Every unspoken rule, every hushed expectation that had kept me quiet was collapsing in real time. Finally, I sat, calmly, slowly, like I'd practiced in another lifetime, like I'd rehearsed for this moment without ever admitting it to myself. The chair groaned beneath me, the sound oddly satisfying. Eric didn't sit. He couldn't. He was pacing in place, his hand on the back of his chair, a bead of sweat sliding down from his temple. The air conditioning hummed steadily, yet he looked flushed, cornered. The HR rep adjusted her glasses, her tone precise. "We'll need to verify both versions through the HR portal," she said. "But Dana's file is digitally sealed. That means any change afterward requires admin-level access," the VP interrupted, his voice low but heavy with implication. The realization hit the room in waves. Admin-level access wasn't shared, it wasn't delegated, it was restricted, and there was only one person in that building with that clearance: Eric. The words didn't need to be spoken. They hung there, invisible but undeniable. He began to talk faster. "Look, performance files go through multiple drafts, right? Sometimes HR sends a preliminary version for managerial notes. This could have been a mix-up. I was just trying to ensure alignment between my feedback and the team's performance metrics." "Alignment?" The HR rep's eyebrow arched slightly. I almost pitied him. Almost. The corporate language poured out of him like a flood, buzzwords and phrases stitched together in panic. "It's about maintaining consistency, you know. Assessments evolve over time. Feedback is a living document. The process is iterative." His voice trembled at the edges. It sounded like panic disguised as vocabulary, and all I could think was how many times I'd sat across from him in meetings, biting my tongue while he repackaged my data, my ideas, my reports into his own. How many times he'd interrupted mid-sentence, smiling that same smug smile, and said, "What Dana means to say is..." I used to believe that professionalism meant restraint, that silence equaled grace. But in rooms like this, silence isn't neutral. It's a weapon, one they hand to whoever speaks first. When HR stepped out to make a call, the air shifted again. Chairs creaked softly, papers shuffled. People pretended to be busy, rearranging notepads, checking watches, but nobody looked at Eric. Nobody spoke to him. The unspoken rule had reversed. He was radioactive now. He muttered something under his breath, too low for most to hear. But I caught it. Women always playing the victim. My pulse slowed instead of rising. The old me might have reacted. The new me just let it hang there, unchallenged, because the truth was louder than anything I could say. The projector behind him was still connected to the conference system. The remote lay beside me, half hidden under a stack of printouts. I clicked a single key on my laptop and my screen mirrored onto the wall behind him. The HR portal appeared in bright, sterile white. A list of access logs, each one time-stamped, each one tagged with his username. I didn't have to narrate it. The facts spoke for themselves. Just thought everyone might want to see the audit trail, I said quietly. No one moved. Eric turned his head slowly, eyes widening as his own name glowed on the wall. The room had turned courtroom. He sat down this time. Slowly, shoulders slumped, breath uneven. The only sound was the faint buzzing of the fluorescent light overhead. The same light that had glared over every late night I'd spent fixing his errors. The same hum that had accompanied every moment I'd doubted myself. And then the faint smell of burnt coffee hit again. Sharp, bitter, full circle. I closed my laptop with deliberate calm. The sound echoed like a period at the end of a sentence. I looked directly at him. "You forged my record to block my promotion," I said. "You tried to humiliate me in front of them. And now you'll explain this to HR." No one breathed. He didn't answer. His jaw tightened. His throat moved, but no sound came. His hands trembled slightly against the table, betraying the facade of control. The same hands that had once pointed across meetings, delegating, directing, dismissing. Moments later, the door opened. HR walked back in, phone still in hand, her face unreadable. "Ite confirmed it," she said simply. "Edits were made under Eric's credentials. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be." The sentence detonated quietly, efficiently, leaving no room for interpretation. A murmur rolled through the room like wind through tall grass. The VP stood up, buttoning his jacket, his expression carved from stone. "We'll handle this privately," he said, but everyone knew what privately meant. Privately meant paperwork. Privately meant HR reports. Privately meant termination pending review. Eric didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the table, unfocused. I wondered if he was replaying his own downfall frame by frame, trying to find where he could have stopped it. When they left, I stayed seated. My hands were steady now. For the first time in months, maybe years, they weren't shaking. I reached for the blue folder, the real one, and flipped through the pages again. The words blurred slightly from the fluorescent light's glare, but I knew them by heart. A decisive, creative leader with exceptional integrity. I almost smiled. Not the triumphant kind, just the quiet, exhaling kind. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming what had been twisted. As I stood and gathered my things, one of my co-workers, Lauren, whispered as I passed her. Her voice trembled with disbelief. "I can't believe you kept that file. You saved yourself." I met her eyes briefly. "No," I said softly. "I just stopped letting someone else tell my story." The words settled between us, calm and final. Outside the conference room, the corridor felt different, brighter. The world sounded alive again. The buzz of printers, the murmur of phones, the faint laughter from the marketing team down the hall. I'd walked through that hallway 100 times before, but never like this. Freedom has a sound. It's not loud. It's clean. Still, deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Men, like Eric, don't disappear quietly. They don't crumble and accept defeat. They drag noise and chaos behind them, searching for someone else to blame. And the look in his eyes as I left told me everything. He wasn't done, but neither was I. I didn't fear him anymore. Fear had lost its grip the moment truth became visible. Silence, my silence, had cut sharper than any confrontation ever could. The elevator chimed softly, and as the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse through the glass wall. Eric, standing alone, staring at the empty chair where I'd sat. For the first time, his face was completely drained of color. That was the first time I saw his face truly pale. And it wouldn't be the last. By the time I reached the parking lot, my hands finally began to shake. Not from fear. Fear had long since burned itself out, but from release. The kind of trembling that comes when the weight finally slips off your shoulders and your body realizes it's allowed to breathe again. The morning sun was already high, its reflection bouncing off 100 windshields like scattered mirrors. The rows of cars gleamed in perfect order, a little too precise for a place that had just hosted chaos. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the warmth of sunlight against my face. For the first time in months, I wasn't walking toward another day of quiet humiliation. I wasn't bracing for his voice behind me, or the sting of being undermined in front of a crowd. I felt free. But freedom doesn't come quietly. It echoes. When I sat in my car, the silence was almost too big. The leather seat creaked beneath me, the faint smell of old coffee and air freshener filling the space. Then the first buzz came. My phone lit up on the passenger seat, then another, and another. Notifications stacking over each other until the screen blurred with light. Slack messages, emails, even a text from someone in accounting who'd barely spoken to me before. The story was spreading faster than wildfire, like spilled coffee racing across a polished glass table. Did you see what happened in the boardroom? HR's calling an emergency meeting. Eric's done. Each message was another ripple, another whisper turned confession. For months, no one had said his name above a murmur. Now they were typing it in bold. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. My breath fogged the leather. The air felt thick with exhaustion and relief. I didn't want to celebrate. I didn't want to gloat. I just wanted quiet, real quiet. Not the kind that comes before someone cuts you down. The kind that exists without expectation. The hum of the city carried through the closed windows, horns, distant construction, the rhythm of normal life. It sounded foreign, almost too alive. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. HR wanted me back in the building. For protocol, they said. I knew what that meant. Paperwork, statements, evidence. They would want every detail written down, signed, sealed, verified. My heartbeat steadied as I walked back through the lobby. The same polished floors, the same receptionist who gave me a strange, sympathetic half smile. As I passed the glass conference rooms, I could feel the shift in the air. People looked up when I walked by now. Some pretended not to. Others followed my movement through the glass like they were watching a movie scene. When I reached HR's office, the rep met me with a softer tone than before. "Dana, thank you for coming back," she said, her voice lower, slower. "We just need your official account." She handed me a form printed on thick paper, the kind they reserve for serious matters. I took it, but my eyes drifted down the hallway. Eric's office. The blinds were half drawn, but not enough to hide him. His door, for the first time, was slightly open. I could see him pacing, tie gone, sleeves rolled up. The man who once filled every inch of a room now looked smaller, swallowed by it. His phone was pressed to his ear. His expression was the picture of panic disguised as control. I turned back to the form and signed slowly. My name looked different this time, steady, deliberate. The HR rep watched me carefully. "We'll be conducting a full investigation," she said. It confirmed the alterations came from his admin login. "We'll need your permission to use your copy as the verified record." "You have it," I said. There was a pause before she added, more gently, "You might want to take some personal days." I almost laughed. "No, I've worked too hard to let him steal my desk, too." Her lips twitched like she wanted to smile, but didn't know if she was allowed to. When I walked back to my cubicle, heads turned again. But this time, it wasn't pity I saw. It was something else. Curiosity. respect, maybe a flicker of guilt from the ones who had looked away before. But it didn't matter. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started typing like it was any other day. Emails came in one after another, from marketing, from logistics, even from an assistant I'd never met in person. Good for you. About time someone stood up to him. And then one that made my breath catch. He did the same thing to me. That one stopped everything. My hands froze above the keyboard. I read it twice, 3 times. The sender was a woman from finance, different department, different floor. I typed back immediately. Do you mean he forged your file too? The reply came within a minute. Yes, 2 years ago. I couldn't prove it. That was when everything fell into place. The pattern, the small rumors, the sudden resignations that no one ever questioned. He had been doing this for years, polishing his own record with the rubble of others. My anger didn't come back all at once. It rose slowly, steady, and clean. This wasn't just about me. This was about an entire system built to protect him. And silence. Silence had been his accomplice all along. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan spun above me, blades slicing the dark into steady, rhythmic lines. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the boardroom again, the projector light on his face, the tremor in his hands. The silence after the truth dropped. But under that replay was something heavier, a question. What if HR buried it? What if all this ended with a quiet resignation letter, a brief announcement, and a company-wide email that said nothing at all? I couldn't let that happen. So I started digging. My laptop glowed against the dark. The HR report would take weeks, but the digital file I'd kept, the one that saved me, was full of invisible fingerprints, metadata, access logs, edits, timestamps. I opened the audit trail and began scrolling. Every entry told a story. Each one showed not just when he changed something, but what he opened before it. And there it was. 2 other files. 2 other employees. Both opened within 5 minutes of mine. 2 other victims. The next morning, I printed everything. Each page slid from the printer like evidence from a crime scene. Lines of numbers, digital trails, dates that couldn't be argued with. I made copies, 3 sets, one for me, one for safety, and one for insurance. I placed the first in my glove compartment, the second in my apartment drawer. The third I handed to someone I trusted, Lauren. I found her in the break room, stirring sugar into her coffee. She blinked when she saw me. You okay? She asked. Better than okay, I said, sliding the envelope toward her. I need you to hold something for me. Don't open it unless I tell you to. Her eyebrows drew together. What is it? Insurance. She hesitated, then nodded. No questions, just trust. She slipped the envelope into her tote bag, zipped it shut, and gave me a look that said she understood more than I'd said aloud. By noon, HR called another meeting. The tone was different this time, measured, cautious. They didn't invite Eric, they invited me. And the department heads. I walked in, the sound of my heels echoing against the tile. The same room, the same table. But everything felt rearranged. The air itself felt rewritten. They gestured for me to sit near the center, the seat Eric used to claim as his throne. The VP cleared his throat. Dana, after reviewing your file and IT's report, he said carefully, we've suspended Eric pending termination review. There it was, simple, clean. Corporate justice wrapped in procedural language. But something in me hesitated. It didn't feel like victory. Because in that same folder of evidence, I'd seen how many times the same red flags were ignored. The complaints that went unanswered, the little cover-ups that paved the way for his confidence. I met the VP's eyes. He didn't just do this to me. The room froze. 2 more employees, I continued. Their files were opened and altered by his account. Same day, same pattern. The VP's pen stilled mid-note. The HR rep's posture changed. How do you know that? The VP asked quietly. Because I checked the timestamps, I said, and I have the evidence. A long breath escaped the HR rep, sharp and involuntary. the kind of sound that belongs to someone realizing they've been part of something bigger than they understood. "Dana," she said, "we'll need you to send that to us immediately." "Already did," I replied, and sent copies to my personal email too, just in case. The VP studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You did the right thing." I almost smiled, not because I needed his approval, because for once, they were the ones scrambling to catch up. When the meeting ended, I stayed seated a little longer. My hands rested on the polished table, the same one that once reflected my humiliation. Now it reflected something else, a woman who refused to be rewritten. The sunlight from the window caught my reflection in the glass wall, same face, same posture. But the expression had changed, no more shrinking. When I finally stood, my chair slid back without a sound. As I walked out, I knew something deep in my chest. The story wasn't finished. People like Eric don't vanish quietly. They leave shadows, rumors, unfinished endings. And revenge. I'd learned something about revenge. It doesn't end when the truth comes out. It ends when the consequences begin. 3 days passed. Eric didn't return to the office. His name vanished from the shared calendar like it had never existed. The morning meeting invites that used to start with Eric J. now started with nothing at all. His chair stayed tucked neatly under the desk, his coffee mug still sitting beside the monitor. For a while, no one touched it. Not because they cared, but because it felt radioactive. His workspace looked frozen in time, trapped in the exact moment he'd last leaned across that desk to intimidate someone smaller, quieter, easier to silence. But I knew better than to mistake silence for surrender. Thursday afternoon, the email arrived. The sender line didn't read HR this time. It read Legal Department. The subject line was short, sterile, terrifyingly precise. Notice of formal complaint. Eric James. The message itself was only 3 sentences long, but my eyes caught on the middle one like a hook. Eric James has filed a formal complaint against the company regarding wrongful suspension. Your name is listed in the report. Please be advised we may request a written deposition. There it was, the backlash, the inevitable recoil from a man who had spent too long building his power on other people's silence. He'd lost the room, lost his leverage, but he hadn't lost his pride. This was his last move, the desperate reach of someone clawing at the air, hoping to catch. A piece of the control slipping through his fingers. I stared at the email until the words blurred. Around me, the office hummed its usual rhythm, phones ringing, printers spitting out forms, people laughing softly near the break room. But it all sounded distant, muffled, like I was underwater. I knew what he was going to do. He was going to paint himself as the victim. He'd twist the story until his lies sounded like truth again. That was his talent. And now he had lawyers to help him do it. But what he didn't have anymore was fear. Not mine, not anyone's. That night I cleared my dining table and spread out everything I'd collected. Every document, every screenshot, every timestamp, the original PDF from HR, the forged one he'd used, the access logs, side-by-side comparisons, the email trails that showed when the file had been downloaded and re-uploaded. The paper smelled faintly of toner and determination. I organized it all, color-coded, labeled, stacked in perfectly aligned folders, yellow for correspondence, blue for HR documents, red for evidence. I backed it all up to 2 flash drives and a cloud account under an alias. When I was done, I sat there for a moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of my apartment. The refrigerator clicked on in the background. Outside, rain had started to fall, soft at first, then steadier, tapping against the glass like a heartbeat. I stared at the reflection of the city lights in the window. The rain streaked down the glass in crooked lines, distorting everything behind it. That was what he'd done, distorted truth until it looked unrecognizable. For a fleeting moment, I thought about quitting, just walking away, starting over somewhere else, letting it all fade into rumor and memory. But then I remembered something my father used to say during Michigan winters. When the snow was waist deep and we were shoveling just to clear a path to the mailbox, he'd glance up from his breath cloud and say, "You don't stop just because it's hard. You stop when you're done." And I wasn't done. The next morning, I sent one email. Not to HR, to General Counsel. The reply came within the hour. Can you come in at 10:30? In the conference room, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and printer ink. The blinds were drawn halfway, muting the sunlight into pale stripes across the table. The head attorney, a man named Robert Hill, waited with two others, one from compliance, one from documentation. I handed them a drive. The metal felt cold against my palm. This includes the full record of forged documents, I said evenly. Mine, and at least two others. They exchanged looks before Robert connected the drive to his laptop. The click of the USB port echoed louder than it should have. They scrolled in silence for several minutes, the faint sound of the keyboard tapping occasionally breaking through. Then the questions started. When did you first notice the discrepancies? How do you know the edits weren't part of standard protocol? Who else had access to these files? Do you have chain of custody documentation for the HR copy? I answered every question carefully, slowly. I gave them dates, times, corroborating names. I made sure every word I said could survive scrutiny. When they were almost finished, I added one more thing. If this goes to court, I said quietly, I'll testify. Robert looked up, eyebrows lifting slightly. You're certain? Absolutely, I said. Then I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. But only if you promise me something. He hesitated. Which is? Don't just fire him quietly. Don't let him walk away with a handshake and a reference letter. He didn't smile, but I saw something shift behind his gaze, a flicker of understanding, maybe respect. Understood, he said. When I left the room, my legs felt heavy, but my spine was straight. Every step down that hallway echoed differently now. Solid, deliberate, unafraid. 2 days later, the email came through HR again. The subject line was as brief as the first one. Update, case resolution. Inside, the message was one line long. Eric James has withdrawn his wrongful suspension claim. No explanation, no apology, no mention of me, just silence. But silence, this time, felt like peace. Word spread fast. By noon, the building knew. He wouldn't be coming back. There'd be no farewell card, no thank you for your leadership email from corporate. His access badge had been deactivated overnight. His desk cleared by security. Just gone. Still, even as the satisfaction began to settle, something inside me didn't feel finished. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about the system that had let it happen in the first place. Cleaning the mess wasn't the same as exposing it. So that night, I wrote a letter. Not dramatic, not angry, just honest. I typed it slowly, paragraph by paragraph, under the glow of my desk lamp. I wrote about how it happened, what I'd found, and how easily it could have been prevented. I attached documentation, names, dates, screenshots, and at the bottom, I signed it only with one word, anonymous. I sent it to the company's internal ethics board. 3 weeks later, an email appeared in the corporate announcements folder. Subject, policy update, performance review authentication. I opened it. Effective immediately, all performance reviews must be verified by both HR and legal prior to manager submission. Manager-level edit access is restricted. All changes will generate automatic notifications to affected employees. No signature, no acknowledgement of what caused it. But I knew, and Lauren knew, and every quiet observer who'd seen that boardroom fallout knew. They'd rewritten the rules in the same ink he'd once used to erase people. That Friday, I stayed late. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. The office was nearly empty by 6. The sun dropped low over Grand Rapids, painting the skyline in gold and rust. From the 17th floor, I could see the reflections of traffic lights flickering below, the slow pulse of the city winding down for the weekend. I leaned against the glass, watching the reflection of myself looking back. Same blazer, same hairstyle, same woman, but different eyes. I thought about the first day I'd walked into this building, nervous, overprepared, careful. I'd tried too hard to be agreeable, too careful not to step out of line. Every meeting, every idea, I'd given away pieces of myself in exchange for approval. And then I thought about the boardroom, the moment I stood up, the weight in my chest dissolving as the truth filled the air, the silence that followed, not empty, not afraid, just still. Mine. I didn't need an apology, or revenge, or validation. Those things fade. What stays is the sound of your own voice after years of swallowing it. I smiled faintly at the city lights. The story had been rewritten. In ink he couldn't erase. It was 2 months later when I saw him again. The DMV isn't the kind of place where you expect closure. It's fluorescent, stale, mechanical. The air thick with the scent of impatience and disinfectant. I was standing in line, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, ticket number B49 printed in faded ink. The monitor above the counter flickered through numbers like it had nowhere better to be. A kid was crying softly somewhere near the license photo booth. A woman in front of me muttered about the wait time. And then I saw him. Eric. For a moment I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, it was him. The same charcoal gray jacket he used to wear on presentation days when he wanted to look important. Only now it hung off his frame like it no longer belonged to him. His shoulders slumped. His hair was longer, thinner, streaked with the kind of gray that doesn't come from age but from losing something you thought you'd never lose. He didn't see me at first. He was at the next counter, half hidden behind a pillar, speaking in that clipped, irritated tone I knew too well. But it sounded different now, stripped of command. "Sir," the clerk was saying patiently, "if the system shows your clearance was revoked, there's nothing I can do. You'll have to reapply." Eric's voice came out sharp, brittle. "I built that system. You think I don't know how it works?" The clerk blinked. "I didn't say that, sir, but I can't override state security protocols." He sighed, loudly, performatively. The kind of sigh meant to intimidate. It didn't work. The clerk just went back to typing. Then he turned, fast, ready to unleash his frustration at someone else. And that's when his gaze caught mine. For one long second, time slowed. He froze mid-breath. The hum of the room dimmed to nothing. My hand tightened around the coffee cup. Our eyes locked, his wide with recognition, mine calm. He was the one who looked away first. His jaw tightened. The skin around his mouth twitched like he'd bitten down on something bitter. Without a word, he shoved his papers back into his folder, muttered something I couldn't hear, and walked toward the exit. He didn't stay to argue, didn't demand to be heard, didn't wait for his number to be called. He just left. And that, somehow, felt louder than any apology he could have given. I stood there until my number finally appeared on the screen. B49. A chime echoed through the speakers. I stepped forward, completed my paperwork, thanked the clerk, and walked out into the cold November air. Michigan winters always carry a certain kind of honesty. The wind cuts straight through you, sharp and unfiltered. That day, it stung my cheeks and filled my lungs until they burned, but it felt clean. On the drive home, I passed the old office building, the one where it had all started. The parking lot was half empty now, the company logo dulled by weather and time. I slowed down at the light, staring at the tinted windows that once made me feel small. They looked smaller now. So did the building. That's the strange thing about power. It only looks big until you step outside of it. I thought about the boardroom, the glare of the projector, the weight of his voice, the way everyone's eyes had been on him until they weren't. Power isn't about volume or titles or how many people nod when you speak. It's the quiet clarity of knowing who you are and what you won't allow again. That night, I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. Inside was an envelope, yellowing at the edges. I'd kept it untouched for months, the last physical copy of the fake review he'd written, his version of me, printed over the truth. I sat at my kitchen table under the soft glow of a single lamp. The house was still. Outside, wind rattled the bare branches against the window pane. I pulled out the papers, one by one. My real review, his forged version. The side-by-side that had changed everything. My name, his signature, his lie. I stared at the forged signature, the uneven spacing, the fake HR watermark he'd copied wrong, the sloppiness of someone too used to getting away with things. Then I lit a candle. The first flame wavered, catching the edge of the paper. The ink curled and blackened, fading into nothing. The air filled with the faint scent of burnt toner. Page by page, I fed the lies into the flame. No ceremony, no anger, just quiet. The soft hiss of paper turning to ash. The glow reflected in the window beside me, faint and steady like a pulse. When it was done, I let the wax burn down until the wick was a quiet ember. The next day, Lauren came over with takeout from our favorite Thai place, drunken noodles, extra chili, and 2 glasses of wine. She kicked off her heels, curled up on my couch, and asked, "So, any news from HR?" "Nothing new," I said. Then I told her about the DMV. Her eyes widened. "He really walked out?" "Didn't even stay to argue." She shook her head in disbelief, then raised her glass. "To walking away." I smiled, clinked mine gently against hers. "No, to walking through." Because that's what this really was. Not an escape, not even revenge, just the long, deliberate walk through every layer of silence and doubt until the truth had room to breathe. We ate on the couch, laughing about old office stories, tiny rebellions that felt safer to share now. When she left, I stood at the window again, watching her taillights disappear down the street. For the first time in years, the night didn't feel heavy. I stayed at the company for another year, not because I had to, because I wanted to finish something I'd started. I got the promotion, team lead, my name on the doorplate instead of under someone else's. I built a team that worked differently, collaboratively, transparently. Every review I signed had 2 signatures. Every report was shared with the people who wrote it. And one day, without realizing it, I stopped checking over my shoulder. Eventually, I left. Moved to Chicago. Different skyline, different rhythm. I started over, not running from anything, but walking towards something that felt like peace. Now, in meetings, when someone questions my ideas or interrupts halfway through, I don't flinch. I don't rush to prove my worth. I just smile. Because once, in a boardroom full of suits and silence, someone tried to rewrite my story, but I had the original, and I read it back to the room. He read my review to shame me, but ended up reading his own downfall. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.